Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options in Play video update. I was talking about this a little bit during the day on the VTF. Figured I'd just go over it just video-wise, just to kind of give you kind of like a picture of what I was speaking about. And it was like a question of like what are some of the names I'm going to look at once the market stabilizes, right? Like what am I looking at for like a bounce or like long candidates once like the selling stops. So we may not be at the bottom yet. I don't know when we're gonna hit the bottom. But once we do, one of like the things I use kind of like an indicator. I mean, there's multiple things, right? I mean, everybody's gonna have something different, but one of like the indicators I use is just relative strength, right? Um, what companies within like a certain sector are outperforming or which are underperforming, right? Because that'll set up trades for maybe for longs, and then if something's underperforming and during a bounce, like it'll set up an opportunity for a short, right? And what I like to do is kind of like gauge that relative strength or weakness of a stock versus like a sector, so like a sector ETF, right? So I mean, I trade a lot of software names, so I used IGV kind of like a broad gauge, right? So IGV, right? Pretty ugly day, breaking below the 50-day. So say for instance, today ended up being the bottom and it firmed up. I don't know if it will, but just say hypothetically, then what I would do is like I would start to look at like the software names, right? The individual names, and like how do they compare to the IGV? Like are they at their respective 50 days, right? Like are they holding above their 50 days, or are they holding below their 100 days, right? Because then that would be relative underperformers, right? Because IGV is above its 50. So if a stock is hanging below its 100, then that to me is like a relative underperformer, right? If it's hanging above its 8 and it's 20, then that could be a relative outperformer, right? So you can kind of use it as like an almost like a gauge of like how it stacks up against what the overall sector is doing. So like if all overall sector is doing such and this is better, so like just using like Twilio's example, right? So Twilio rolling back down, but you can see that compared to what everything else is doing, it's more or less in line, right? Had great numbers, stock pulled back. It looked like it was going to hold in, but then it started to roll over. So compared to the IGV, right, more or less in line. And I'll acknowledge that Workday is going to be reporting tonight, right? So this could change, but Workday, right? I mean, at the moment, it's hanging higher, right? It's hanging above its 50-day. I mean, after earnings, it might be below, but for right now, if the thing stabilizes and Workday doesn't fall upon an earnings, then you could say like there's some relative strength there, right? Because it's hanging well above its 50-day. Shopify, like another name, right? You can see what I mean, like how similar a lot of these move with like the overall sector ETF, right? So, I mean, back into its 50-day, back into its 50-day. So it might not be outperformers, it might not be underperformers, it might just be performing in line. So like it might not be as interesting for a trade idea, right? But I just wanted to like do this like visually to like give you the idea of what I do, right? So if you're looking at chip stocks, right, then you can kind of use the SMH as like your benchmark, right? Like how is the chip name I'm looking at compared to what the overall sector is doing, right? So is it materially better, materially worse? And then if it's better, that might be something I look at to see if it can, outperform again once things stabilize, right? So I'm focusing on like those relative strength, because those you would think would be the ones that start to turn higher quicker, because that they're the ones that have led throughout, right? So again, I mean, this is just it's one of the things I do use when I'm trying to screen for like new swing trade ideas, just because as everything drops together, it kind of gives like these opportunities to like really like pinpoint where the relative strength is and where the relative weakness is, and I find that pretty useful when trying to find new trade ideas. All right. So if you like this video and you're looking for more information on swing trading with options, or options or hedging with options, which is kind of important right now, please follow up with the link in the description of the video for more information on options to play. I hope you have a wonderful night. Stay well, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.